Start cooking at 4 a.m., my mother-in-law ordered, shoving a guest list into my hands. 30 people. Don't embarrass this family again. My husband didn't defend me. He looked me in the eyes, smiled, and said, "You heard my mom. Make sure everything is perfect this time." I smiled back. Of course. They thought they had broken me. They thought I'd spend another holiday being their unpaid servant while they took all the credit, but they had no idea. At 3 a.m., while they were sleeping peacefully, I was already sitting at the airport with my passport in one hand. And the biggest secret of my life in the other. By breakfast, 30 hungry relatives would walk into an empty kitchen. By lunch. My husband would discover that I hadn't just left the house. I had taken something they could never replace. And their perfect family reputation was about to collapse in front of everyone. If they wanted a servant, they should have treated her like family before she became their worst nightmare. My name is Emily Carter. For 7 years, I believed marriage meant sacrifice. Every birthday, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas. I cooked, I cleaned. I decorated, while my mother-in-law, Margaret, proudly accepted compliments from guests as if she had done everything herself. "Margaret, your dinners are always perfect." She'd laugh. "Thank you. I trained Emily well." Everyone laughed. Except me, because they never knew I hadn't sat down to eat until everyone else had finished, and my husband, Daniel, never once spoke up, not once. 3 weeks before our wedding anniversary, Margaret announced the biggest family reunion in years. 30 relatives. 3 generations, everyone coming to our house. She handed me a 4-page menu. "You'll start cooking at 4 in the morning." I stared at the list: turkey, roast beef, lasagna. 4 desserts, fresh bread, homemade pies, everything from scratch. I quietly asked, "Can we hire catering?" She slammed her coffee cup onto the table. "Only lazy wives hire caterers." Daniel looked at me. I waited for him to defend me. Instead, he nodded. "Mom's right." That's when something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, silently, and once a quiet woman stops caring. She's already planning her revenge. That same night, I called the one person my husband never expected, his former business partner, the man Daniel had cheated years earlier. And that's when I learned the truth: the company wasn't actually Daniel's. Half of everything legally belonged to me, because Daniel had used my inheritance to save the business, without ever telling me. I smiled for the first time in years. This wasn't going to be revenge. This was going to be justice. The guest list hit the kitchen counter with a loud slap. 30 people, my mother-in-law, Margaret, said coldly. "Breakfast at 8 sharp. That means you start cooking at 4 in the morning." She slid another sheet toward me. It wasn't a menu. It was a schedule. 4:00 a.m., bake cinnamon rolls. 4:30 a.m., prepare breakfast casserole. 5:15 a.m., roast vegetables. 6:00 a.m., set the dining tables. 6:45 a.m., finish desserts. 7:30 a.m., change clothes, smile, and greet guests. No breaks. No help, just orders. I looked at my husband, Daniel. He was sitting comfortably on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Daniel." I whispered. He didn't even look up. "You heard Mom." Margaret crossed her arms with a satisfied smile. "And make sure nothing goes wrong this time." The room fell silent. I forced a smile. "Of course." They both smiled back, and neither of them noticed the tears I refused to let fall, because after 7 years of marriage, I had learned one painful lesson. Tears only entertained them. People always thought I was lucky. Daniel came from one of the wealthiest families in our town. His mother organized charity events, his father donated to churches. Everyone called them the perfect family. What nobody knew was that inside their house, I wasn't family. I was free labor. Every holiday, I cooked. Every birthday, I cleaned. Every reunion, I served food while everyone else laughed together. If a dish tasted good, Margaret accepted the compliments. If something went wrong, it was always my fault. 3 years earlier, I had made one tiny mistake. I accidentally burned a tray of dinner rolls. Margaret told that story at every family gathering. "Ladies," she'd laugh, "remember when Emily almost burned down my kitchen?" Everyone laughed, including Daniel. He laughed the loudest. That hurt more than the joke itself. I used to think, if I worked harder, if I became the perfect wife, things would change. Instead, the harder I worked, the more they demanded. By my 7th anniversary, I wasn't a wife anymore. I was their personal chef, their cleaner, their event planner, and apparently, their unpaid servant. That evening I stood alone in the kitchen washing dishes. 32 dinner plates. 47 glasses. 6 cooking pots. Nobody offered to help. From the living room I heard laughter. Margaret was telling another story about me. "You know what," she said. "I don't even worry anymore. Emily always does exactly what she's told." The room exploded with laughter. Daniel raised his glass. "Best decision I ever made." My hands froze under the running water. Best decision, marrying me wasn't love. It was convenience. An hour later. I walked upstairs carrying folded laundry. As I passed the study. I heard voices. Margaret whispered, "She's completely under control." Daniel chuckled. "I know. She'll never leave. Where would she go? She has nobody." My heart stopped, then Margaret laughed. "Exactly. For 7 years, they hadn't loved me, they had managed me, controlled me, used me, and they were absolutely certain. I'd never fight back." That night. I couldn't sleep. At 2:17 a.m. I opened my old email account, the one I hadn't checked in years. There was a message, unread, from my late grandmother's lawyer, sent almost 8 months earlier. Subject line, urgent, regarding your inheritance. I stared at the screen. My hands started shaking. I clicked it, and the first sentence changed everything. "Mrs. Emily Carter, if your husband has not informed you about the trust created in your name, please contact my office immediately." I frowned. "If your husband has not informed you? What trust? What inheritance? Why would Daniel know?" Before I did, as I kept reading, the color drained from my face, because in that moment. I realized my husband hadn't just been lying to me. He had been hiding something worth millions, and suddenly, leaving for the airport wasn't just an escape anymore. It was the beginning. Of the greatest revenge they would never see coming. I read the email 3 times, then 4. Then 5. Each time, the words became harder to believe. "Your grandmother established a trust in your name before her passing. According to our records, your husband, Daniel Carter, attended the legal meeting on your behalf after informing us you were emotionally unable to do so." My heart pounded. I had never been told about any meeting. I had never authorized anyone to represent me. The lawyer continued. "Several documents appear to contain your signature. Before we release the remaining assets, we require your personal confirmation." My signature? I never signed anything. A cold chill ran down my spine. Had Daniel forged my name, or had he tricked me into signing papers I never understood? Either way, my husband wasn't just selfish. He had stolen from me. The next morning, I acted like nothing had happened. Margaret was already waiting in the kitchen. "You're late." I looked at the clock. It was 7:01.1 minute. She was angry because I was 1 minute late. "I'll make breakfast now," I said quietly. She shook her head. "You'll never be good enough if you're always making excuses." Daniel walked in wearing his expensive suit. He kissed his mother on the cheek, then he looked at me. "Mom works hard too, Emily. Try appreciating her." I almost laughed. Margaret hadn't cooked a meal in years, she hadn't washed a single dish, yet somehow, she was the victim. I lowered my head. "I'm sorry." That was exactly what they expected. An apology, submission, obedience. What they didn't know was that my revenge had already begun. At 10 o'clock, Daniel left for work, Margaret drove to her charity committee meeting, the house became silent. For the first time in years. I had freedom. I grabbed my purse and drove straight to the lawyer's office. The receptionist smiled. "Mrs. Carter? We've been trying to reach you for months." My stomach tightened. She led me into a conference room where an elderly man stood as I entered. "Emily," he said warmly. "I knew your grandmother very well." He placed a thick file on the table. "This belongs to you." Inside were property deeds, investment accounts, bank statements, and photographs of my grandmother. Tears filled my eyes. "I thought she left me nothing." The lawyer looked confused. "Nothing? Emily. Your grandmother adored you. She left almost everything to you." My hands began trembling. "How much?" He adjusted his glasses. "Approximately $8 million in assets." The room spun. $8 million. Daniel had told me grandma died with debts. He even made me sell my childhood home because, according to him, there was nothing left. Everything had been a lie. The lawyer slowly slid another document toward me. "I believe you should see this." It was a power of attorney. My name was signed at the bottom, but it wasn't my handwriting, not even close. Someone had forged it. The lawyer sighed. "I suspected something wasn't right. Your husband insisted everything had been discussed with you. But your grandmother specifically instructed us to speak only with you." I felt sick. Daniel hadn't simply hidden my inheritance. He had stolen my future. That afternoon, I returned home before anyone noticed I had been gone. Margaret was barking orders into the phone. "No, the flowers need to be white. The reunion must be perfect." She turned to me. "Emily. The silverware isn't polished. Honestly, do I have to think of everything?" I smiled sweetly. "I'll take care of it." She nodded proudly. "Good girl." Good girl. That's all I had ever been to her, not a daughter-in-law, not family, just someone to command. But in exactly 6 days, those same silver spoons would be lying untouched on the dining table, because there would be no breakfast. No celebration. No obedient daughter-in-law, only 30 angry relatives, and an empty kitchen. That evening, Daniel came home carrying a bottle of expensive wine. He looked unusually cheerful. Big week ahead, he said. Our family reunion is going to be unforgettable. I looked him straight in the eyes. You're right. It'll be unforgettable. He smiled, completely unaware of the hidden meaning behind my words. Then his phone buzzed. He stepped into the hallway to answer it. The moment he walked away, his briefcase tipped over, several papers slid onto the floor. I bent down to pick them up. One document caught my attention. It was from the bank. Across the top, in bold letters, were the words, Transfer of Trust Assets, Final Approval. My name was listed as the original owner. Daniel's name. As the beneficiary, the transfer date, the morning after the family reunion. I stared at the paper in disbelief. Everything suddenly made sense. The reunion wasn't just a family gathering. It was the distraction. While 30 relatives praised Margaret's perfect family, Daniel planned to steal the last piece of my inheritance forever. He thought I would be too busy cooking breakfast. To notice that my entire future was disappearing. He had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the woman he believed would never leave, and in less than a week. He was going to discover exactly what happens when the servant stops obeying. For the next 6 days. I became the perfect wife again. I smiled. I cooked. I cleaned. I apologized, even when I had done nothing wrong. Margaret was thrilled. You've finally learned your place, she said proudly. I simply nodded. Yes, Margaret. Inside. I was counting down the hours. Every evening, while Daniel slept beside me. I quietly built my escape. I opened a brand new bank account. I rented a safety deposit box. I copied every document from the lawyer. Then. I hired the best forensic handwriting expert in the state. 3 days later, his report arrived. The signature on the power of attorney was fake, without question, without doubt. Someone had forged my name, and the report named every difference, every stroke, every letter, every flaw. It was enough evidence to destroy Daniel in court, but I wasn't ready yet. No, I wanted something better. I wanted the truth to destroy him in front of the people whose opinion mattered most, his family. The family reunion was only 2 days away. Margaret turned our house into a military camp. Emily, wash the crystal glasses. Emily, iron the tablecloths. Emily, call everyone and confirm they'll be here by 8. By the end of the day. My feet ached. My back burned. My hands were covered with tiny cuts from preparing vegetables. Meanwhile, Margaret and Daniel sat on the patio drinking iced tea. Laughing, planning, watching me work. Not once did either of them offer to help. That evening, I carried fresh towels upstairs. As I walked past Daniel's office, I heard voices again. The door wasn't fully closed. Margaret whispered, after Sunday, everything will finally belong to Daniel. He laughed. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. And if she refuses? Margaret's answer made my blood run cold. Then we'll remind her she has nowhere else to go. Daniel chuckled. She's too weak to leave. The two of them laughed together. I stood outside the door, completely silent, because they were wrong. I already had somewhere to go. The next morning. I returned to the lawyer's office. I need one more favor, I said. He leaned back. What is it? I want every remaining asset frozen. He smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Within an hour, every transfer requiring my approval was blocked. Daniel didn't know it yet, but his $1 million payday had already disappeared. Then I made one final phone call. Hello? Is this Richard Hayes? A deep voice answered. Yes. My name is Emily Carter. There was a long silence. I believe you were once Daniel Carter's business partner. Another pause. Then. I've been waiting years for this phone call. Richard told me everything. Daniel hadn't just cheated me. He had cheated him too. Fake contracts, hidden accounts, forged invoices. Daniel had built his fortune on lies. Richard still had copies of every document. I'll testify, he said. If you're finally ready to expose him. I closed my eyes. Thank you. For the first time in years. I wasn't alone. That night, Margaret handed me the final shopping list. Be at the supermarket by 6 tomorrow morning. I smiled politely. I'll take care of everything. Daniel wrapped his arm around my shoulder. I knew I could count on you. He kissed my forehead. The same man who had stolen my inheritance had the nerve to call me his partner. I almost laughed. At exactly 11:47 p.m. I walked into the guest bedroom. Hidden beneath the bed was a small navy blue suitcase. Inside. My passport. My new credit cards, the original inheritance documents, the forensic report, the flight ticket, departure, 3:55 a.m. Destination, London. I zipped the suitcase shut. Tomorrow. Margaret expected me to wake up at 4 in the morning. To cook breakfast for 30 relatives. Instead. At 4 in the morning. I would be 30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, and by the time their guests arrived, the only thing waiting for them would be an empty kitchen, and an envelope sitting in the middle of the dining table. Inside that envelope was a single sentence that would destroy the Carter family forever. Enjoy the meal your son promised you. I chose freedom instead. But that wasn't the only thing inside. Beneath the note were copies of every forged document. every bank record, and the phone number of the FBI Financial Crimes Division. Daniel thought Sunday would make him a millionaire. Instead, it was about to become the day he lost his money, his reputation, his marriage, and his freedom. At exactly 2:45 a.m. My alarm vibrated, not a sound echoed through the house. Margaret was asleep, Daniel was asleep, the entire Carter family believed their obedient daughter-in-law would soon be standing in the kitchen, kneading dough for homemade cinnamon rolls. Instead, I quietly got out of bed. I didn't switch on the lights. I didn't make coffee. I didn't even look back. The suitcase I had packed the night before was already waiting beside the front door. Before leaving, I walked into the dining room one last time. The massive oak table was beautifully decorated. .30 polished plates. .30 crystal glasses, fresh flowers in the center. Everything looked perfect, everything, except one thing, there was no food. I smiled, then I placed a white envelope in the middle of the table. On top, I wrote only 3 words. For everyone present. At 3:08 a.m. the taxi pulled into the driveway. The driver stepped out quietly. Airport, he asked. I nodded. He picked up my suitcase. As I climbed into the back seat. I looked at the house through the window. 7 years. 7 years of cooking. 7 years of insults. 7 years of pretending I was happy. I expected to cry. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. At 3:41 a.m. I walked through airport security. My phone buzzed. Margaret, don't be late. I expect breakfast started before 4. I smiled. I didn't reply. Another message arrived. Daniel, love you. Thanks for making today special. Love? No, he loved what I did for him, not who I was. I switched off my phone forever. At exactly 4:02 a.m. Flight 207 lifted into the dark sky. As the city disappeared beneath the clouds. I whispered, I'm finally free. 4 hours later, back at the Carter house, Margaret woke up smiling. Today's reunion would prove to everyone that her family was perfect. She walked downstairs expecting to smell fresh bread. Instead, silence. She frowned. Emily? No answer. She opened the kitchen door. The counters were spotless, the ovens were cold, every refrigerator shelf was empty, not even a loaf of bread, for the first time in years. The kitchen looked as if nobody had ever lived there. Emily. Margaret screamed so loudly the windows shook. Daniel came running downstairs. What happened? Where is she? He searched every room, bedroom, bathroom, laundry room, garage, nothing. Then he noticed something. Emily's closet empty, every dress, every pair of shoes gone. His face turned white. No. He whispered. She wouldn't. Then he saw the envelope. At exactly 8:00 a.m. the doorbell rang, then again, and again. 30 relatives began arriving, laughing, carrying gifts. Expecting breakfast, Margaret forced a smile. Come in. Everyone walked toward the dining room, then they stopped. The table was empty. No food. No coffee. No Emily, only one white envelope lying in the center. Daniel slowly picked it up, his hands were shaking. Inside was a single handwritten note. Dear family, for 7 years, I cooked every holiday while someone else accepted the praise. Today, Margaret and Daniel can finally show you everything they claimed they did themselves. The kitchen is yours. Enjoy the breakfast they promised. I chose freedom instead. Emily *. The room became painfully quiet. One uncle looked at Margaret. I thought you always cooked. Margaret's lips trembled. I. She couldn't answer. A cousin looked at Daniel. So, where's breakfast? Nobody moved, nobody smiled. The perfect family had just been exposed. Then Daniel unfolded the second stack of papers inside the envelope. His eyes widened at bank statements, forgery reports, property records, copies of the fake power of attorney. And one final page. A legal notice from Emily's attorney. Divorce petition filed. Asset freeze request approved. Forensic evidence attached. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. This can't be happening. But it was. His relatives weren't looking at him with admiration anymore, they were looking at him with suspicion, and before anyone could speak, the front doorbell rang again. This time. It wasn't another guest. 2 men in dark suits stood outside. One of them held up a badge. Good morning. We're here to speak with Mr. Daniel Carter regarding allegations of financial fraud and document forgery. Daniel's knees nearly gave out. Margaret grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling, because Emily hadn't simply left for the airport. She had left them with something far more devastating than an empty kitchen. She had left them with the truth. No one spoke. The cheerful conversations that had filled the house only moments earlier disappeared into complete silence. 30 relatives stood frozen around the dining table. The smell of fresh coffee they had expected never came. Instead, all they could hear was Daniel breathing heavily. The older agent looked directly at him. Mr. Daniel Carter? Daniel swallowed hard. Why, yes. I'm Special Agent Michael Harris. We have a warrant to question you regarding allegations of financial fraud, identity theft, and document forgery. Margaret immediately stepped forward. There must be some mistake. My son would never, the agent calmly interrupted her. Ma'am. We have evidence signed by a forensic handwriting expert. He held up a folder. And we also have a formal complaint filed this morning by Mrs. Emily Carter. Every face in the room turned toward Daniel. His aunt whispered, Emily reported you? He couldn't answer. Margaret forced a laugh. This is ridiculous. My daughter-in-law is emotional. She's probably upset because of the reunion. The younger agent slowly opened the folder. Mrs. Carter also submitted copies of financial records. Would anyone here like to know where the money for this house actually came from? Margaret's smile disappeared. What do you mean? The agent looked around the room. This house was purchased using money inherited by Emily Carter from her late grandmother. Several relatives gasped. Daniel's cousin stared at him. You told us your company bought this house. Daniel remained silent, because for the first time in his life, he had no lie ready. Then another voice came from the front door. Excuse me. Everyone turned. A tall man in a gray suit stepped inside. Daniel's face instantly turned pale. Richard. Richard Hayes smiled politely. Good morning, everyone. He looked around the room before speaking. My name is Richard Hayes. I used to own Carter Financial Group. Until Daniel stole it from me. The room exploded with whispers. What? No way. I remember that company. Richard placed another stack of documents on the dining table. These are original contracts, emails, bank transfers, and copies of fake invoices. He looked directly at Daniel. I've waited 6 years to tell the truth. Daniel clenched his fists. You have no proof. Richard smiled. I do now. He nodded toward the federal agents. They've had copies since yesterday. Daniel's shoulders dropped. Margaret suddenly turned toward the guests. Don't listen to them. Emily has poisoned everyone's mind. One elderly woman slowly stood up. It was Daniel's grandmother. 90 years old, quiet, respected by everyone. She looked at Margaret with disappointment. Tell me something. Margaret nodded nervously. Of course. The old woman pointed toward the kitchen. In 7 years. I've never once seen you cook. So why did you always accept compliments for Emily's work? Margaret couldn't answer. Another relative spoke. I always wondered why Emily never sat with us. Someone else added, she was always washing dishes. And every holiday she looked exhausted. I thought she enjoyed hosting. One by one. People started remembering, not the lies, the truth. Emily had done everything. Margaret had taken every bit of credit. Daniel had watched it happen. At that exact moment. Daniel's phone vibrated, then again. He looked down, his bank manager, his accountant, his lawyer. 23 missed calls. He answered one. What? The color vanished from his face. What do you mean every account is frozen? He listened. No, that's impossible. Another pause. The company accounts too. He nearly dropped the phone. Every business account, every investment account, every personal account connected to Emily's inheritance had been frozen by court order. He now had access to almost nothing. Across the Atlantic, Emily sat by the window of her hotel room in London. For the first time in years, she enjoyed breakfast while it was still hot. A croissant, fresh fruit, coffee. No shouting. No insults. No orders. Her phone rang. It was her lawyer. Emily. I thought you'd like to know. She smiled. Tell me. The reunion didn't last 20 minutes. Emily laughed softly. And Daniel? He never got his inheritance. The accounts are frozen. The investigation has officially begun. Emily closed her eyes. 7 years of pain. Didn't disappear overnight, but for the first time, justice had finally begun. She thanked the lawyer and ended the call. Then she looked out over London's skyline and whispered, they thought leaving would be my greatest loss. They never imagined it would become theirs. Back in America, Daniel sat alone in the living room. The guests had all gone home. Not one of them said goodbye, not one of them shook his hand. Margaret collapsed into a chair. What are we going to do? Daniel stared at the divorce papers. For the first time, he understood something he should have realized years ago. Emily hadn't left because she was weak, she had stayed for 7 years because she was strong, and now that strength had become the weapon that destroyed everything he thought he owned. But Daniel wasn't ready to give up. He picked up his phone, opened his contacts, and dialed Emily's number one last time. He had no idea that the person who answered would change his life forever. Daniel's hands trembled as he pressed my number. Once, twice, 3 times, each call went straight to voicemail. He threw the phone onto the couch. No, she can't just disappear. Margaret paced across the living room. Call her friends. I already did. Her cousins? They don't know. Her office? She resigned. Margaret stopped walking. What? Daniel nodded slowly. 3 weeks ago. His mother stared at him in disbelief. And you never noticed? He lowered his head. The truth was humiliating. He hadn't noticed because he had never asked Emily about her life. He only asked whether dinner was ready. 5,000 miles away, I was sitting on the balcony of a small hotel overlooking the River Thames. The morning air was cool. For the first time in 7 years. I drank coffee without rushing. No timer. No shouting. No criticism, just silence. My phone rang. The screen showed an unknown American number. I smiled. Right on time. I answered. Hello? There was a long pause, then Daniel's voice cracked. Emily. I've been trying to reach you. I looked out at the river. I know. Please. Come home. Home, that word made me laugh. I never had a home, Daniel. I had a workplace. He was silent. Emily. Mom didn't mean those things. I smiled sadly. No? Then why did she say them for 7 years? He had no answer. I'll make everything right. You can have whatever you want. Our marriage. The house. The company. I'll sign everything over. I closed my eyes. It's amazing. What is? You finally want to give me what was already mine. Silence, then I heard him crying. Real tears, the first tears I had ever heard from him. Please. I love you. I replied quietly, if you loved me, you would have protected me. You didn't. I ended the call. Back in America, Daniel stared at the phone. She had hung up, not shouted. Not argued, simply hung up. For the first time. He felt completely powerless. The next morning, every major local newspaper carried the same headline. Local businessman under investigation for alleged fraud. Television stations parked outside the Carter home. Reporters waited on the sidewalk. Neighbors watched from their windows. Margaret peeked through the curtains. Oh, my God. We're ruined. The phone rang again. This time. It was the chairman of the charity foundation where Margaret had served for 15 years. Margaret. Until this investigation is complete, we're asking you to step down. Her voice shook. You can't do this. I'm innocent. The chairman sighed. The public doesn't see it that way. The call ended. Margaret slowly lowered the phone. The charity that had made her famous had just removed her. That afternoon, Daniel received another letter. He opened it with shaking hands. It wasn't from Emily. It was from the bank. Foreclosure review. INITIATED. The house he had proudly shown off to everyone was legally tied to Emily's inheritance. If the court ruled in her favor. It could be seized. Daniel dropped into a chair. Everything was slipping away. Meanwhile. I met my lawyer through a secure video call. He smiled. I have good news. I could use some. The forensic report has been accepted. And Richard Hayes has agreed to testify. I nodded. What about the forged signatures? The judge has authorized a criminal investigation. I took a deep breath. What happens next? He leaned forward. Daniel will probably try to settle. I don't want a settlement. I know. You want the truth. Exactly. That evening. I walked through Hyde Park as the sun set. Children laughed, couples held hands, street musicians played soft violin music. I suddenly realized something. For 7 years. I had forgotten how peaceful life could be. Then my phone buzzed again. This time. It wasn't Daniel. It was an unknown woman. I answered. Hello? A soft, elderly voice spoke. Emily. It's Grandma Rose. Daniel's grandmother. I hope you don't mind me calling. I smiled. I don't. She sighed deeply. I owe you an apology. You were the only person in that family who ever treated me with kindness. Tears filled my eyes. You don't have to apologize. Yes, I do. There was a pause. I watched Margaret mistreat you. I watched Daniel stay silent. And I stayed silent too. I'm ashamed. I wiped away a tear. Thank you for telling me. Grandma Rose's voice grew firm. I've already changed my will. I frowned. What? My children won't inherit another penny. They've confused money with character. But you earned my respect years ago. Emily's eyes widened. Before she could respond, Grandma Rose said something that changed everything. There's something you don't know. Your grandmother. And I made a promise 25 years ago. A promise that involves a secret your husband has spent his entire life trying to hide. Emily stopped walking. What secret? Grandma Rose whispered. Daniel Carter isn't the real heir to the Carter family fortune. My heart skipped a beat. I gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean? Daniel isn't the real heir? Grandma Rose let out a slow breath. I've kept this secret for 35 years. My husband made me promise never to tell anyone. But after what Daniel did to you, I won't protect him anymore. I sat down on a park bench. The world around me seemed to disappear. I'm listening. It started before Daniel was born. The Carter family owned one of the largest manufacturing companies in the state. Your husband grew up believing the business would one day belong to him. But that was never the plan. I frowned. Then who was supposed to inherit it? She answered quietly. My younger son. Daniel's uncle, Thomas. I had never heard that name before. Grandma Rose continued. Thomas was honest. Kind. He actually cared about people. My husband believed he was the only one worthy of leading the family business. So he wrote a new will. Everything was left to Thomas. I whispered, then what happened? There was silence. Then. Thomas died in a car accident. My stomach tightened. Was it really an accident? Grandma Rose hesitated. The police said it was. But your grandfather never believed it. He hired private investigators. They found signs that someone had tampered with the brakes. I felt chills run down my arms. No one was ever charged. The case went cold. But from that day forward, your grandfather trusted no one. Before he passed away, he created a second will. This one divided the family fortune. Half was placed in a protected trust. The other half stayed with the company. He believed no single person should ever control everything. I frowned. Why are you telling me this? Because. She paused. Daniel never knew about the protected trust. My heartbeat quickened. What trust? The one your grandmother helped create. Everything suddenly connected. My grandmother, the lawyer, the inheritance, the forged documents, Grandma Rose continued. Your grandmother and I were best friends. When she learned how unhappy you were becoming, she convinced my husband to protect you. I could barely breathe. He admired your kindness. He once told me, if Emily ever needs a way to start over, make sure she has one. Tears rolled down my cheeks. A man I'd met only a handful of times had seen my pain, while my own husband never had. So the inheritance. I whispered. It wasn't just from my grandmother? No. It was a joint trust. Your grandmother contributed her estate. My husband added investments. Together, they built a future they hoped you would never need. She sighed. But sadly, you did. I closed my eyes. So Daniel wasn't stealing only my grandmother's money. No. He was trying to steal the trust your grandfather specifically protected for you. And that's why the lawyers froze everything so quickly. Just then, another call came through. It was my attorney. I need to take this. Grandma Rose replied, one last thing. Be careful. Daniel isn't finished. He'll do anything to save himself. I answered the lawyer. Emily. We have a problem. My heart sank. What happened? Daniel has disappeared. What? He didn't return home last night. The federal agents went to question him this morning. He was gone. So was his passport. A cold feeling settled in my chest. He fled? We don't know. But there's more. The police searched his office. They found shredded financial records. And an empty safe. I stood up. What was inside the safe? We're not certain. But Richard Hayes believes it contained original documents proving years of financial fraud. I stared across the river. Daniel wasn't running because he was innocent. He was running because he was desperate. Back in America, Daniel sat alone inside a cheap roadside motel nearly 200 miles from home. The television showed his photograph. Businessman wanted for questioning in fraud. Investigation. He switched it off. His phone buzzed. A private number. He answered cautiously. Hello? A calm male voice spoke. You've made quite a mess. Who is this? You don't know me. But I know who. Really tampered with Thomas Carter's brakes 30 years ago. Daniel's face turned ghost white. The stranger continued. And unless you do exactly as I say, I'm going to tell the police who ordered it. Daniel whispered, that's impossible. Everyone connected to that case is dead. The stranger laughed. Not everyone. The line went dead. Daniel slowly lowered the phone. For the first time he realized the lies surrounding the Carter family were far older, and far darker, than he had ever imagined. Daniel stared at the dark motel room. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Who had called him? How could a stranger know about Thomas Carter's death? More importantly, how did they know Daniel had spent years trying to erase every trace of it? He immediately packed his bag. Within 10 minutes. He was back on the highway. Running again, thousands of miles away. My lawyer called me for an emergency meeting. When I entered his office, Richard Hayes was already there. His face was serious. Emily, Richard said. We've discovered something. He pushed a faded photograph across the table. It showed 3 men standing in front of the Carter manufacturing headquarters. One was Daniel's grandfather, the second was Thomas, the third was a man I'd never seen before. Who's he? Richard answered quietly. His name is Victor Kane. He used to be the family's financial advisor. What happened to him? He disappeared the same week Thomas died. The lawyer opened another folder. We searched old corporate records. Victor didn't disappear. He changed his identity. And, Richard leaned forward. We believe. He's the one who just called Daniel. A chill ran through me. So he's alive? Yes. And if we're right, he's been watching the Carter family for decades. Meanwhile, Daniel pulled into an abandoned gas station. His phone rang again, the same private number. He answered immediately. What do you want? Victor's calm voice replied, I want the truth. Daniel laughed nervously. The truth died years ago. No. It survived. And so did the evidence. Daniel's breathing became heavy. You're bluffing. I kept copies of everything. The fake invoices. The forged wills. The payments. And the photographs. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. What photographs? The ones taken the night Thomas's brakes were cut. Silence, then Victor spoke one final sentence. You have 24 hours. Meet me. Or I give everything to federal investigators. The line went dead back in London. I couldn't stop thinking about that conversation. Something wasn't right. Daniel wasn't acting like an innocent man. He was acting like someone terrified that an old secret was about to explode. Richard looked at me. I think he's going to run. My lawyer shook his head. No. Men like Daniel don't run forever. They go back to protect what matters most. The money. That afternoon, the federal agents searched the Carter mansion again, this time. They didn't leave empty-handed. Hidden behind a false wall in Daniel's office, they found a steel lockbox. Inside, there was cash, luxury watches. A second passport, and a small USB drive. One agent plugged it into a secure laptop. Dozens of folders appeared. Offshore accounts property transferprivateledger. Then one folder simply labeled .emily. The room fell silent. The lead investigator opened it. Inside were scanned copies of my passport. My bank information. My forged signatures, and a handwritten note from Daniel. Keep Emily financially dependent. If she ever learns about the trust, transfer remaining assets immediately. The agent slowly removed his glasses. Well, I think we just found motive. The next morning, news channels across the country interrupted their regular programming. Breaking news: new evidence emerges in Carter fraud. CAS reporters described the discovery of hidden financial records and evidence suggesting a long-running scheme to misappropriate assets. My phone exploded with messages, former coworkers, old neighbors. Even relatives I'd never met, each one saying the same thing. We're sorry. We had no idea. You deserved better. For years, people believed I was quiet because I lacked confidence. Now, they finally understood. I had been surviving. Late that evening, a secure email arrived in my inbox. There was no sender, only one attachment. A video file. Its title was Chilling. Watch before the police deal with trembling hands. I clicked play. The video showed an old parking garage. The date stamp read August 14th. 30 years ago. A black luxury sedan rolled into view. Two men stepped out. One was unmistakably a young Victor Kane. The other was someone whose face was hidden beneath a hat. Then the hidden man looked up for just 1 second. I gasped. I knew that face. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Thomas. It wasn't Daniel's grandfather. It was someone no one had ever suspected, someone who had comforted the family at Thomas's funeral, and remained one of the Carter family's closest friends for 3 decades. If this video was authentic, the real mastermind behind everything, Star, had been hiding in plain sight all along. My hands were trembling. I paused the video, then rewound it again, and again. The man's face appeared for barely 2 seconds, but 2 seconds were enough. I recognized him immediately, Harold Benson. Daniel's godfather. The family's trusted attorney for over 30 years, the man who had comforted everyone at Thomas Carter's funeral, the man who had hugged Daniel when he was a child, the same man who had looked me in the eyes at our wedding and said, "Welcome to the Carter family." My stomach turned. I immediately called my lawyer. You need to see this. Within 20 minutes, Richard Hayes and my attorney were watching the footage. When the video ended, neither of them spoke. Finally, Richard whispered, "I don't believe it." My lawyer nodded slowly. If this recording is authentic, Harold Benson isn't just a witness. He's part of the conspiracy. The next morning, federal investigators compared the face in the video with decades-old photographs. By noon, they called my attorney. The facial recognition isn't conclusive enough for court, but it's strong enough to obtain a search warrant. That afternoon, agents arrived at Harold Benson's mansion. He greeted them with a smile. "Good afternoon, officers. How may I help you?" The lead investigator handed him the warrant. "We're conducting a search regarding the Carter investigation." For the first time in 30 years, Harold Benson stopped smiling. The search lasted 6 hours. Most of the house revealed nothing. Then one young investigator noticed something strange. A bookshelf in Harold's office didn't line up with the wall. He pressed gently. The shelf swung open. Behind it was a hidden room. Inside were dozens of filing cabinets, boxes labeled by year, old computers, external hard drives, and one heavy steel safe. When they opened it, everyone fell silent. Inside were original wills, property deeds, offshore account records, and a notebook written entirely in Harold Benson's handwriting. Across the front point, 3 chilling words. The Carter Plan. That evening, Harold Benson was brought in for questioning. At first, he denied everything. I've represented the Carter family for decades. I've done nothing illegal. The lead investigator placed the notebook on the table. Harold stared at it, his face lost all color. You searched my office. Then came the second piece of evidence, the old video. Then, Victor Kane walked into the interrogation room. Harold nearly fell out of his chair. You. I thought you were dead. Victor smiled. You weren't the only one who knew how to disappear. For the next 4 hours, Harold said nothing. Then the investigators showed him one final document. It was a signed cooperation agreement. Victor Kane had agreed to testify. Every meeting, every payment, every forged document, every secret. Harold slowly removed his glasses. I'm 81 years old. I'm too old for prison. The investigator leaned forward. Then tell us the truth. Harold closed his eyes. After nearly a minute, he spoke. It wasn't Daniel who created the fraud. It was me. The room fell silent. I convinced Daniel's father to hide money overseas. I forged contracts. I manipulated wills. I controlled the company's lawyers. I made everyone rich. Except the people who deserved it. The investigator asked, What about Emily? Harold looked ashamed. She was never supposed to be involved. The trust her grandmother created was untouchable. But Daniel became greedy. He demanded access. I refused. So, he forged Emily's signature without telling me. The investigators exchanged glances. For the first time, they realized Daniel had crossed a line even Harold Benson wouldn't. Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone in another motel hundreds of miles away. The television suddenly switched to breaking news. Longtime attorney Harold Benson has been taken into federal custody in connection with the Carter financial investigation. Daniel's face turned white. No. Harold knew everything. If Harold talked, there would be nowhere left to hide. His phone rang. This time. It wasn't a private number. It was Harold Benson. Daniel answered immediately. Harold. The old man's voice was calm. It's over. What? I've told them everything. Daniel felt his knees buckle. You promised. Harold interrupted him. No, Daniel. I promised to protect the Carter family. You destroyed it. The call ended. Daniel stood frozen. For years. He had believed money made him untouchable. Now, every person who had protected him was turning against him. The following morning. I received another call from my lawyer. His voice sounded different, lighter. Emily. I have some very good news. What is it? The prosecutors have enough evidence. They're preparing criminal charges. I smiled. Finally, justice was catching up with Daniel, but before my lawyer could continue. He added one more sentence. There's just one problem. We've learned Daniel isn't running anymore. I frowned. Then where is he? My lawyer answered quietly. He's on a flight to London. I froze. He knows exactly where you are. I couldn't breathe. He's in London? My lawyer answered calmly. Yes. Immigration records show he landed 2 hours ago. Federal authorities know where he is, but until an international warrant is approved. He's legally free to move. I looked around my hotel room. For the first time since leaving America. I didn't feel safe. Richard Hayes immediately stood up. You're not staying here. Within an hour. I checked out of the hotel. A black SUV was waiting outside. The driver introduced himself. My name is James. I worked with the Metropolitan Police for 20 years. Your lawyer hired me. He loaded my suitcase. From now on, you don't go anywhere alone. Across London, Daniel walked through the crowded streets carrying nothing but a backpack. He looked exhausted. His expensive suits were gone, his designer watch had disappeared. He had sold almost everything for cash. The only thing left was desperation. He asked a hotel receptionist, I'm looking for Emily Carter. The woman politely smiled. I'm sorry, sir. We can't give out guest information. Daniel slammed his hand on the counter. You don't understand. I'm her husband. The receptionist picked up the phone. Security. Daniel walked away before they arrived. That evening. I received an unexpected message. Not from Daniel, from Grandma Rose. It contained only one sentence. Don't meet him alone. A minute later. My phone rang again. It was an unknown number. I already knew who it was. I answered. What do you want? Daniel's voice sounded broken. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I have nothing to say. Please. I know I don't deserve it. But there's something you don't know. I remained silent. Then he whispered, my mother lied to both of us. An hour later, against my lawyer's advice. I agreed to meet him. But not alone. Richard, James, and two plainclothes police officers waited nearby. The meeting took place in a quiet public garden. Daniel looked nothing like the man I had married. His beard had grown, his clothes were wrinkled, dark circles surrounded his eyes. He looked defeated. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. I'm sorry. I looked at him. No. You're sorry because you got caught. He lowered his head. You're right. I am. But that's not why I came. He reached into his backpack. James immediately stepped forward. Daniel slowly raised both hands. It's only papers. He placed a sealed envelope on the bench. I want you to have this. I didn't touch it. What is it? My mother's journals. I frowned. What journals? The diaries she kept for over 30 years. He looked me straight in the eyes. I finally read them. And tears filled his eyes. Everything I believed about my family was a lie. He continued quietly. My mother hated your grandmother. She hated that my grandfather respected her. When you inherited that trust, she became obsessed. She convinced me that the money should belong to us. He wiped away a tear. I believed her. I asked one question. Did you forge my signature? He didn't hesitate. Yes. The single word echoed through the garden. No excuses. No denial, just the truth. I picked up the envelope. Inside were handwritten journals. One page had been marked with a red ribbon. I began reading. Margaret's handwriting was unmistakable. Emily is too kind to fight back. Daniel only needs to keep her dependent until the trust is transferred. Once the money is ours, she'll have nowhere to go. I slowly closed the journal. Every doubt disappeared, every question answered. Daniel looked at me one last time. I'll plead guilty. I'll return everything. I'll testify against everyone. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. You were the only real thing in my life. I stared at him for several seconds, then I quietly replied, the saddest part. I would have shared everything with you. The inheritance. The future. The dreams. If you had simply loved me. You never needed to steal. Daniel closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his face. He finally understood. His greed hadn't made him rich. It had made him lose the only person who had ever loved him honestly. As Daniel turned to leave, police officers stepped forward. One officer spoke calmly. Daniel Carter. Based on the evidence provided by U.S. authorities and your own admission today, you are under arrest pending extradition proceedings. Daniel didn't run. He didn't argue. He simply held out his hands. The handcuffs clicked shut. As he was led toward the police vehicle. He looked back at me one final time. I hope. One day. You find the happiness I destroyed. The door closed, the vehicle drove away. I watched it disappear into the London traffic. For the first time in 7 years. I felt no anger, only peace, but my journey wasn't over, because a week later. My lawyer called with news that stunned everyone. The court hadn't just ruled in my favor. It had awarded me something no one thought possible, complete ownership of the Carter estate. 3 weeks later. I stood outside the courthouse. The morning air was cold, reporters crowded the entrance, camera flashes lit up the sidewalk. No one was waiting for Daniel anymore. They were waiting for me. One reporter called out, Emily. Do you have a statement? I smiled politely. Not yet. Then I walked inside. The courtroom was completely silent. Daniel entered wearing a gray prison uniform. His hands were cuffed. He looked thinner. Older, broken. When our eyes met. He immediately looked away. For 7 years. I had been the one who couldn't meet his eyes. Now, the roles had changed. The judge reviewed the evidence, the forged signatures, the financial records, the hidden accounts. Margaret's journals, Harold Benson's confession, Victor Kane's testimony, and finally. Daniel's own admission. The judge removed his glasses. Mr. Carter. This court finds overwhelming evidence that you knowingly participated in fraud, identity theft, and the unlawful attempt to transfer assets belonging to your wife. Daniel stood motionless. The judge continued. The divorce is granted. All assets acquired through the fraudulent use of Emily Carter's inheritance are returned to Mrs. Carter. The Carter residence. The investment portfolio. The trust assets. And the controlling interest connected to those funds are awarded to Emily Carter. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The empire Daniel had tried to steal now legally belonged to the woman he had treated like a servant. Then the judge looked at Margaret. Mrs. Carter. Although the criminal charges against you differ from your son's, the court finds that your journals demonstrate intentional participation in a long-term scheme to manipulate Mrs. Emily Carter. Margaret burst into tears. I was only trying to protect my family. The judge answered firmly, no. You were protecting greed. Outside the courthouse, television crews broadcast the verdict live. The headline read, Former daughter-in-law wins multi-million-dollar fraud. CASE people across the country watched. Many recognized my story, not because they had experienced fraud, But because they had spent years being overlooked, used, taken for granted. My story had become theirs. A month later. I returned to the Carter mansion, not to live there. To say goodbye. The rooms felt strangely empty. The grand dining room, where I had served hundreds of meals, was silent. I walked into the kitchen, the same kitchen where I had cried alone countless nights. I opened one cabinet. Inside sat the old rolling pin I had used every holiday. I picked it up, smiled, and quietly placed it into a donation box. I wasn't taking memories with me. I was leaving them behind. 2 weeks later, the mansion was sold. Instead of keeping the money for myself, I announced something that surprised everyone. Part of the proceeds would establish the Emily Carter Foundation. Its purpose was simple: to provide legal assistance and emergency financial support for spouses trapped in financially abusive relationships. When reporters asked why, I answered, because freedom shouldn't depend on whether someone has enough money to escape. Grandma Rose attended the opening ceremony. She hugged me tightly. Your grandfather would be proud. So would your grandmother. I smiled through tears. I hope so. She handed me a small wooden box. I've been saving this. Inside was an old silver key. What's this for? She smiled. Your grandmother's cottage. It's yours. A few months later. I drove to the little cottage by the lake. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't luxurious, but it was peaceful. The birds sang in the trees, the water sparkled under the afternoon sun. For the first time in years, the silence felt comforting instead of lonely. I unlocked the front door. On the fireplace mantel sat a framed photograph. My grandmother, Grandpa Carter, and Grandma Rose. On the back of the frame. A handwritten note. A home is built by love, never by control. I held the photograph close to my heart. One autumn afternoon. A letter arrived from prison. The sender was Daniel Carter. I opened it. It contained only a few lines. Emily, every day I remember the mornings you woke before sunrise while I stayed in bed. I thought your kindness was weakness. It was strength. I lost everything because I never appreciated the one person who truly loved me. I'm sorry. Daniele folded the letter, walked outside, and placed it into the fireplace. As the paper turned to ash. I whispered, I forgive you. But I won't live in your shadow anymore. A year later, the Emily Carter Foundation had helped hundreds of people rebuild their lives. Some escaped abusive marriages, some started businesses, some simply found hope again. Every success reminded me of one truth: the greatest revenge is not making someone suffer. It's building a life so full of peace and purpose that the people who tried to break you become nothing more than a chapter in your past. And every Thanksgiving after that. I cooked exactly one meal for myself. I set one plate on the table, raised a cup of coffee toward the sunrise, and smiled, because for the first time. No one was ordering me into the kitchen. I had finally become the queen of my own life. The END.